Honorable Osahine Afejo Makin, Professor Bwedi from UPSA, welcome home. You are an alumnus of this university. Dr. Frank Bano from GIMPA, Dr. Dabo from UEW, colleagues from UCC who are present, the TESCON patron, Nananum, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I stand before you this afternoon to state the purpose of our gathering. I want to underscore the fact that gathered in here as a segment of our population that forms 38% of the total population of this country. So nobody, no political party, no group of persons, no leadership can take this population for granted. So it is very important that we gather here to interact with the young people of our party. When I heard of the Young Commons Summit, my first question was that what is happening to what we know as the Young People's Forum of this party? But I've been convinced that it is not here to replace, but it's to complement the activities of TESCON. So TESCONians, don't get worried, don't shy away. Let's see how we can work together as we complement each other to bring this party to where it ought to be. I know we all are happy with where we are, but we are not supposed to despair. As we engage you, we engage in you because we believe that you are the core of the party. The last campaigns we had in 2024 was a digital campaign. And I believe that we lost the campaign on the digital space, broadly. So as we engage in you as our digital ambassadors. We are also trying to bring our minds to the fact that being a part of us is a civic responsibility. Now, if it's a civic responsibility, then we need to come shoulder to shoulder and ensure that together we can take our party forward. Through this forum, I believe that we're going to take you through what I call a political socialization. We need to understand what our colors stand for. We need to understand what our brand is. We need to understand who we are as a party. I believe some of you are where you are because your fathers or your uncles or people close to you are. But we want you to believe that you are a part of us and want you to be part of us and be proud of us. And I think that is why we're here today, and that's why this Young Commons Forum has come to stay. We will give it all the support it needs as faculty, and we will mentor you as a people who are proud of our heritage. And I want to believe that after today, we will walk out there, chest out, shoulders high, and believe that we are the only party that can save this country.
I am here to do a very simple exercise. An introduction of a person that needs no introduction. When you are giving birth in the market, everybody knows you. This is a man everybody knows. Help me with hand of applause. Welcome to the stage, Osahine Alexander Afenyo Martin.
This afternoon, we have met here to inaugurate the Young Commons Forum UCC Summit, and in doing so, we are going to swear in the new executives. And I have this singular duty to present to you a lecture or a paper on the subject matter, the Dankwa Buzia Dombo center-right ideology and its impact on Ghana's socio-economic development, a focus on the Kufuor and Akufo-Addo governments. I have taken the pain to be very factual since I'm within the four walls of the academia. I intend to present to you what you can verify and validate and engage your mind on, and in the end, to help you enrich the governance of our country. When in the 2024 elections, my party did not do well, and eventually we were ushered into the 9th Parliament as the minority, there was one objective amongst us as members of the minority caucus: not to win an argument and to win a vote, but to contribute with substance on the floor of the House. That was our objective, that the Speaker will not rule for us to win. But when history is being told, our contribution must be seen as that which enriched democracy and the governance of our dear nation. Ladies and gentlemen, and my dear students, our country's post-independence politics has been dominated by three broad political traditions: the liberal democratic Dankwa-Buzia Dombo tradition, the socialist-oriented Nkrumah's tradition, and a quasi-Nkrumah's Kum-Rawlings tradition that emerged during the Provisional National Defense Council era and was later institutionalized within the Fourth Republic. While Nkrumahism emphasized state-led development, centralized political authority, and socialist economic planning, the Dankwa-Buzia Dombo tradition, of which I'm a proud member, advanced an alternative vision grounded in liberal democracy, constitutionalism, individual liberty, decentralization, and market-oriented economic organization. The Rawlings tradition combined a populist rhetoric and strong state intervention with pragmatic engagement with neoliberal economic reforms, thereby occupying an ideological space that was neither purely socialist nor fully liberal. Together, these three traditions have provided the ideological foundations upon which Ghana's dominant political parties have mobilized support, articulated policies, and governed the state. The Fourth Republic and the consolidation of party ideology. Let me submit that with the advent of the Fourth Republic in 1992, Ghana's political competition has largely crystallized around two dominant parties: the National Democratic Congress, which traces its ideological roots to Rawlings and Nkrumah's traditions, and the New Patriotic Party, which I'm a proud member, which explicitly identifies with the Dankwa-Buzia Dombo political lineage. This afternoon, I focus on the practical expression of the Dankwa-Buzia Dombo ideology during the administrations of President John Agyekum Kufuor and President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. These two periods provide a valuable empirical basis for assessing translation of center-right ideological principles into governance practice. Together, they span 16 years of democratic rule under the Fourth Republic, emphasizing different global economic conditions, domestic political challenges, and stages of Ghana's democratic consolidation. I argue from this that our tradition, the Dankwa-Buzia Dombo center-right ideology, has played a decisive role in Ghana's socio-economic development. While often labeled as elitist, the tradition's philosophy is not inherently exclusionary, nor do its contemporary policy applications represent a departure from its ideological foundations, but rather a pragmatic adaptation to Ghana's evolving developmental needs. Let me take you through some historical evolution of this tradition. First, this tradition is anchored in the political thoughts and leadership of Dr. Joseph Boakye Dankwa, Professor Kofi Abrifa-Busia, and Chief Simon Diogun Dombo, whose combined contributions laid the intellectual, institutional, and coalitional foundations of Ghana's center-right political movement. Historically, the tradition traces its origins to the UGCC, the United Gold Coast Convention, the first organized political party to emerge in Ghana, founded in 1947 by a group of nationalist leaders, later celebrated as the Big Six. The UGCC played a pivotal role in articulating elite opposition to British colonial rule in the late 1940s. Among its leading figures was Dr. J.B. Dankwa, whose contribution to nationalist thoughts, constitutionalism, and civil liberties earned him a recognition by colonial authorities as the doyen of Gold Coast politics. It was at the invitation of J.B. Dankwa that Dr. Nkrumah returned to the Gold Coast in December 1947 to serve as a general secretary of the UGCC. However, profound ideological and strategic differences soon emerged. While Dankwa and the UGCC leadership in the protection of fundamental human rights, Nkrumah advocated a more radical, mass-based mobilization strategy. These tensions culminated in Nkrumah's break from UGCC and the formation of the CPP in 1949. In the landmark 1951 legislative elections, the first held under the Kose Constitution of 1950, the UGCC performed poorly. The party secured only 3 seats, won by J.B. Dankwa, William Oforiatta, and R.R. Amponsa, while the CPP achieved a decisive electoral victory. This outcome exposed UGCC's limited mass appeal and accelerated the fragmentation and reorganization of the opposition politics. In May 1952, the UGCC merged with the National Democratic Party and dissident members of the CPP to form the Ghana Congress Party. The GCP subsequently evolved into the National Liberation Movement in 1954. The NLM emerged as a predominantly Akan-based political movement, breaking away from the CPP in response to dissatisfaction with the party's perceived marginalization of certain interests within the Akan bloc and its highly centralized system of governance. A critical northern dimension was added to this evolving opposition tradition with the formation of the Northern People's Party in April 1954. Led by Simon Diogun Dombo, the traditional chief or Diori in the Upper West region, the party sought to articulate and defend the political interests of the Northern Territories. The Northern People's Party contested both the 1956 and 1957 elections, thereby extending opposition politics beyond its predominantly southern base and reinforcing the tradition's emerging national character. Following Ghana's attainment of independence on 6th March 1957, opposition forces consolidated further in response to the increasingly centralizing tendencies of the CPP government. In November 1957, opposition parties, including Dombo's Northern People's Party, the Anlo Youth Organization, Muslim Association Party, Togoland Congress, etc., merged to form the United Party, UP, which became the principal parliamentary opposition in the First Republic. The emergence of the UP was a reaction to Nkrumah's Avoidance of Discrimination Acts, which prohibited the formation of political parties along sectional, regional, religious, and ethnic lines. After several years of political repression and military interventions, the center-right tradition re-emerged, most prominently in Ghana's Second Republic, under Progress Party, led by Professor Kofi Abrefa-Busia. The Progress Party won the 1969 elections, ushering in a government committed to a liberal democracy, decentralization, and market-oriented economic management. Although Buzia's government was overthrown by a military coup in 1972, the transition endured. During the Third Republic, it found expression through the Popular Front Party, led by Victor Owusu, and the United National Convention, UNC, led by William Oforiatta. Both parties trace their ideological ancestry to the Dankwa Buzia Dombo tradition. Though they were defeated by Hila Liman's PNP, People's National Party, in the 1979 election, by June of 1981, the two parties merged to form All People's Party, which emerged as the principal opposition in the Third Republic. This period of constitutional politics was, however, abruptly terminated by the 31st December military coup d'etat, after which the Provisional National Defense Council, led by Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, banned all political parties. Despite these electoral setbacks and repeated interruptions to constitutional rule, the Dankwa Buzia Dombo tradition survived a coherent ideological lineage, setting the stage for its eventual institutional consolidation in the Fourth Republic through what has become known as the New Patriotic Party, NPP. Respected professors, student leadership, my dear students, after more than a decade of military rule under Jerry Rawlings, a new constitutional order was initiated through a consultative drafting process that culminated in a national referendum on 28 April 1992. Following popular approval of the Constitution, the ban on party politics was lifted, paving the way for the re-emergence of multi-party democracy and the formal establishment of political parties, including the New Patriotic Party, which was founded on 28 of July 1992. The MPP emerged as the institutional successor to the Dankwa Buzia Dombo political tradition. Ideologically, the MPP adheres to the principles of liberal democracy with strong emphasis on the rule of law, constitutionalism, and the protection of individual rights and freedoms within a political environment free from intimidation and repression. This ideological orientation is rooted in the political philosophy of J.B. Dankwa, who articulated the vision of a property-owning democracy as follows, quote, "Our party's effort will be to liberate the energies of the people for the growth of a property-owning democracy in this land, with the right to life, freedom, and justice as principles to which government and laws of the land should be dedicated in order specifically to enrich life, property, and liberty of each and every citizen, end quote. Various subsections of MPP's constitution reference the concept of property-owning democracy, but a more elaborate articulation of this ideological commitment was presented on the party's official website in 2013 under the caption, Our Creed, and it states, and I beg to quote, "We believe in property-owning democracy. We believe in freedom of the individual, of choice, of speech, and of enterprise. We believe that national developments start with the individual who has the right to choose, fully grow and exploit his or her God-given talent. We believe that government has a duty to provide access to relevant education and training that would empower the individual's development, to make available, affordable, quality health care to every citizen, to create and sustain an environment that offers opportunity to all, to guarantee the rule of law and protection of rights that enables the individual to flourish. We believe that we are responsible for ourselves, but that in our development, we must raise our families, improve our community, and contribute to the creation of a wealthy country. Finally, we believe that the people of Ghana, the government, and each and every one of us must accept that there will always be those who are unable to provide for themselves, and for them we must provide a level of support, a safety net, unquote. Thus, the MPP functions as a modern organizational vehicle through which this tradition and its ideology has been articulated in the Fourth Republic. Now, what are the core tenets? I shall proceed to take you through the core tenet of this tradition, which is underpinned by certain principles that have remained remarkably consistent despite changes in political context, party labels, and constitutional regimes. These are: 1, liberal democracy and constitutionalism. At the heart of this tradition is a firm commitment to liberal democratic governance anchored in constitutional rule, separation of powers, and the protection of fundamental human rights. From Danqua's early advocacy for constitutional government under colonial rule to Buzia's emphasis on parliamentary democracy in the Second Republic, the tradition has consistently rejected authoritarianism and arbitrary rule. Second, rule of law, human rights, and individual liberties. Closely linked to constitutionalism is the tradition's insistence on the supremacy of the rule of law and the safeguarding of civil liberties. This tradition views the state as constrained by law, accountable to citizens, with particular emphasis on freedom of speech, association, conscience, political participation. Third, democratic governance, decentralization, and pluralism. The tradition places strong emphasis on decentralization of government and political pluralism as safeguards against excessive concentration of power. This principle was reflected in opposition to over-centralization under the CPP and later in Buzia decentralization policies, as well as Dombo's advocacy for the political inclusion of historically marginalized regions, particularly the Northern Territories. Fourth, free market economy and capitalism. Economically, the tradition favors private sector-led development market-oriented policies while recognizing a regulatory role for the state. It rejects state-dominated economic models in favor of an enabling environment in which individual initiative, entrepreneurship, and competition can drive. Property-owning democracy. This is one value that has often been misconstrued, and I shall proceed to explain. One of the most distinctive elements of the tradition is its conception of development as the expansion of property ownership among citizens. Popularized by Dankwa and later adopted by successor parties, the idea of property owning democracy reflects belief that widespread ownership of productive assets enhances personal liberty, economic security, and democratic stability. And finally, social responsibility and limited welfare provision. While emphasizing individual responsibility, the tradition does not advocate an unrestrained laissez-faire system. Rather, this tradition recognizes the obligation of the state to provide basic social service and social protection for vulnerable groups, thereby balancing market efficiency with social cohesion. My dear students, let me proceed to submit to you the practicality of this ideology. I shall contend that the most enduring socio-economic contributions under the Fourth Republic, and I say so proudly, have been realized through social interventions introduced under the Akufo-Addo administrations. These interventions were strategic investment in human capital, productivity, upward mobility, consistent with center-right political thought. Before examining some specific policy interventions, it is important to clarify that the Dankwa Dombo Busia center-right tradition should be understood not merely as an elitist political project in the pejorative sense often implied by its critics, but as an empowerment-oriented ideology that seeks to expand access to the social, economic, and institutional conditions necessary for individual advancement. While the founders of the tradition were undeniably elites in their education, social standing, and intellectual orientation, this elitism was instrumental rather than exclusionary. It was grounded in the conviction that effective leadership, sound institutions, and disciplined governance are prerequisites for lifting individuals from conditions of vulnerability into self-reliance, productivity, and civic participation. In this sense, elitism within the Dankwa Busia Dombo tradition functions not as a barrier, but as a ladder designed to raise individuals from the margins into the mainstream of national development. It is within this ideological framework that the socio-economic policies of Kufuor and Akufo-Addo administrations must be interpreted. I therefore submit that there is nothing inherently contradictory in embracing elitism when it is deployed as a tool for social mobility and national development. On the contrary, both administrations demonstrated that a center-right elitist informed ideology can be ethically and effectively mobilized to broaden opportunity, deepen inclusion, empower citizens to rise through their own effort within a supportive institutional framework. Now permit me to analyze the Kufuor administration, the foundation it laid within the context of this ideology. My dear students, the Kufuor administration marked the first sustained opportunity for the Dankwa Buzia Dombo center-right ideology to be implemented within the Fourth Republic, coming to power after nearly 2 decades of Rawlings-led governance and inheriting an economy marked by macroeconomic instability, institutional decay, and limited access to basic social services. The Kufuor government prioritized macroeconomic stability, institutional reform, and democratic consolidation. Far from representing a rigid or doctrinaire market orthodoxy, the administration demonstrated how a center-right philosophy can operate within a developing economy, combining macroeconomic stability, private sector expansion, social protection, and productivity enhanced to empower citizens. In what follows, I shall examine the major flagship interventions of the administration. 1. Health insurance. Perhaps the most transformative social intervention program of the Kufuor era was the introduction of the National Health Insurance in 2003. The NHIS represented a paradigmic shift in Ghana's social policy architecture. By replacing the exclusionary cash and carry system with a pooled insurance model, the state reduced the economic barriers to healthcare access to millions of Ghanaians. It is my submission that from the center-right ideological perspective, the NHIS was not an act of welfare populism, but an investment in productive capacity. Access to healthcare strengthens human capital. Health is a prerequisite for self-actualization, labor participation, and entrepreneurial activity. By safeguarding individuals from catastrophic health expenditure, the NHIS enhanced economic security, reduced vulnerability, induced poverty, and enabled citizens to engage more fully in economic life. A healthy population is better positioned to work, innovate, and accumulate assets, core features of a property-owning democracy. In this sense, the scheme operationalized the center-right philosophy that social protection should empower individuals to function effectively within the market, not withdraw from it. The capitation grant, free compulsory universal basic education, and school feeding program. Let me further submit that the Kufuor administration also placed strong emphasis on basic education as a mechanism for long-term social mobility. The capitation grant eliminated school fees at the basic level, while the school feeding program incentivized enrollment and retention, particularly in low-income and rural communities, by providing one hot nutritional meal daily to pupils in public kindergartens and primary schools. The introduction of the school feeding program and the effective implementation of the free compulsory universal basic education reinforced the ideological commitment to the individual empowerment through education. These interventions reflected a center-right logic in the most constructive sense. I repeat, these interventions reflected a center-right logic in the most constructive sense because they lifted children from disadvantaged background into the human capital pipeline necessary for elite participation in economic and civic life. By keeping children in school, improving nutrition, and reducing household costs, burdens, These programs expanded access to education. Education in this framework was social investment consistent with the tradition's vision for a property-owning democracy built on individual advancement. In the long term, education equips individuals with the tools to compete in the marketplace, secure employment, create enterprise, and improve their socio-economic standing. Now, the all-important metro mass transit, which we call the Kufuor bus, the revamping of public transport. The Kufuor administration also introduced the metro mass transit system, popularly known as Kufuor bus. It was a strategic intervention aimed at restoring efficiency and affordability in Ghana's public transport sector. This policy aligned with the center-right developmental thinking that sees infrastructure as a facilitator of private productivity. By reducing transportation costs and improving mobility, the policy enhanced labor movements, market access, commercial activity. Indeed, it made it affordable. Doing so, it expanded economic participation and reduced structural inequalities in access to opportunity. Now, the cocoa sector reforms and free input support, not the one that they've reduced the producer price. Omate so almost 10 million. Cocoa Kufuor. Lose almost 10 million. The Kufuor administration undertook major cocoa sector reforms, including the introduction of free inputs, such as fertilizers and improved seedlings to cocoa farmers. Rather than replacing private agricultural activity, these reforms strengthened producers with a market framework. The result was a substantial increase in cocoa production, improved farmer incomes, strengthened rural economics, and enhanced foreign exchange earnings. By supporting asset-owning farmers to increase productivity, the policy directly reinforced the ethos of property-owning society. Then the Kufuor administration introduced the golden age of business and private sector-led growth. President Kufuor declared a golden age of business, signaling a deliberate policy shift towards private sector-led industrialization. This was a deliberate commitment to macroeconomic stabilization, improved regulatory frameworks, and investment promotion to create an environment conducive to entrepreneurship and enterprise expansion. This approach was deeply rooted in the center-right thinking, government as an enabler, not a controller, private enterprise as the engine of growth, individual initiative as the foundation of national prosperity, therefore strengthening a small and medium-scale enterprises during this period, broadened Ghana's entrepreneurial base, and expanded opportunities for wealth creation. This initiative inspired renewed hope and confidence in Ghana's economy and attracted many Ghanaians from the diaspora to return home to invest in our economy. Now, on social security and pension reforms, the Kufuor administration established a multi-tier pension system, which further illustrates that this empowerment-oriented approach was meant for the people of Ghana, especially the aged. The reform aimed to ensure income security in retirement while mobilizing long-term domestic savings for investment. This policy aligns squarely with the center-right principles by encouraging individual responsibility, saving culture, and asset accumulation, thereby reinforcing economic independence across life cycle. Now let me turn to President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, 2017 to 2025. The scaling universalizing and deepening the empowerment. The Akufo-Addo government built upon the gains under the Kufuor administration and sought to re-engineer Ghana's development model by shifting the focus from consumption-led growth to local production and industrialization in an era marked by extraordinary global disruptions, including the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain shocks, and geopolitical instability. It also pursued strategic social intervention as a means of accelerating social mobility and inclusive growth. I now turn to its key flagship interventions. 1. The almighty free SHS. My dear professors, student leadership, and students, the critic can be loud and say all they can about the free SHS, but by far, without argument, it stands as the most emblematic social intervention of the Akufo-Addo administration. And without subjecting it to any further argument, the most consequential social intervention in Ghana's Fourth Republic. By removing financial barriers at the secondary level, the policy drastically expanded access to education for thousands of students from low-income households who would otherwise have been excluded from senior high school. And I must emphasize that it was the grace of God that enabled me to complete St. Augustine's College. I would have been a dropout. And I know many of my colleagues who had distinction with me at the JHS level in our BEC examination, who because there was no money at home, they could not pursue secondary education. Akufo-Addo must be commended. In doing so, it did not merely increase enrollment figures, it widened the pipeline of opportunity. This intervention transformed education from a privilege of birth into a function of talent and effort, thereby democratizing access to the elite knowledge economy. Education within the Dankwa Buzia Dombo center-right conception of a property-owning democracy is the primary instrument through which individuals develop their talent, enhance their productivity, and acquire the capacity to participate meaningfully in economic life. Therefore, the free SHS represent not a departure from center-right philosophy, but its practical fulfillment, empowering individuals with human capital necessary to become economically self-reliant. In center-right terms, free SHS is best understood not as a consumption spending, but as human capital formation on a national scale with long-term returns. With long-term returns in productivity, innovation, and social cohesion. Over time, the expansion of secondary education strengthens the skilled labor base, promotes social mobility, reduces intergenerational poverty, and contributes to national productivity. In this sense, the free SHS is both a social intervention and a long-term economic strategy aimed at lifting citizens from structural disadvantage into sustainable participation in Ghana's development. The icing on the cake to complement the free SHS was the extension of free tuition to technical and vocational training in Ghana. The Akufo-Addo administration also ensured that TVET was free, removing of the barriers for junior high school graduates and youth seeking practical skills. This expansion reflects a center-right development, a philosophy that values skills empowerment and productive inclusion, recognizing that formal education alone is insufficient in preparing individuals for competitive participation in a modern economy. By integrating TVET into broader free SHS framework, the policy aimed to cultivate a workforce equipped with industry-relevant skills, enhance employability, and stimulate enterprise creation. The socioeconomic impact of this extension has been significant. It has broadened access to technical training, capacity in vocational schools, and improved alignment between educational outcomes and the labor market demands. In doing so, the policy contributes to reduce youth unemployment, enhance human capital, and greater economic resilience, while reinforcing the tradition's emphasis on empowering individuals to transform their skills into sustainable livelihood within a market-oriented development model. We cannot submit on these reforms without adding the stem. The Akufo-Addo administration again placed emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and maths, and set up model schools for STEM and provided facilities to make them attractive. Now let me turn to industrialization, the 1D, 1F. Our friends have cancelled the 1D, 1F, and last week I asked the Minister of Trade, what replacement have they for the private sector? There is none. The reason why unemployment is increasing. Under the 1D, 1F initiative, which represent the clearest expression of the tradition's belief in private sector-led development, supported but not supplanted by the state. This 1D, 1F was not just an industrial policy, but a deliberate attempt to democratize industrial capitalism by extending productive opportunity beyond traditional urban centers. Rather than centralizing industrial growth in Accra and a few metropolitan enclaves, the policy sought to anchor economic activity at the very district level, thereby integrating local economics into national and global value chains. By providing incentives, credit facilitation, and infrastructural support, the state acted as an enabler of enterprise, not its owner. This approach aligns squarely with the center-right ideology. The state creates the conditions for production, while individuals and firms generate value. The socioeconomic impact of 1D, 1F lies in its emphasis on job creation, skills acquisition, and local wealth formation. In ideological terms, I submit that the policy sought to expand the property-owning democracy envisioned by Dankwa by transforming citizens from economic spectators into participants in productive enterprise. Nana Addo also invested in agriculture, the planting for food and jobs. This policy reflects a similar ideological logic applied to agriculture. PFJ redefined agriculture by shifting from subsistence support to productivity-driven empowerment through subsidized input, extension services, and guaranteed markets. The policy aimed to make farming a commercially viable and dignified economic activity, particularly for smallholder farmers. From the center-right perspective, the planting for food and jobs was about unlocking individual productive capacity in rural Ghana, increase yield, improve food security, and reduce import dependence, translated directly into higher incomes and economic resilience for farming households. By restoring agriculture as a pathway to prosperity rather than survival, the Planting for Food and Jobs program reinforced the tradition's ideology that development begins with the liberation of the individual effort. On the healthcare sector, the Nanadu, recognizing the need to have healthcare facility, initiated the Agenda 111. Now let me proceed to deal with the issue of adapting this ideology to the demands of modern developing economy. One question, ladies and gentlemen and students, that opponents often pose is, why would a party commit to individualism and property-owning democracy, implement an extensive range of social intervention policies? At first glance, such interventions are often portrayed as ideologically inconsistent with the center-right principles. However, it is my contention that this is misrepresentation, this interpretation is misplaced. Although several flagship social interventions introduced under Kufuor and Akufo-Addo administrations have been criticized by some observers as a departure from the orthodox center-right ideology, I contend that such critics misunderstood both the tradition itself and the developmental context within which these policies were implemented. In reality, these interventions do not represent ideological deviation, but rather context-sensitive adaptation of the tradition to the structural realities of a modern developmental economy. The policies of Kufuor administration reveal a deliberate effort to stabilize the macroeconomy, restore investor confidence, and expand social access within a liberal democratic framework. From the introduction of the health insurance and school feeding programs to mass transit, cocoa sector reform, free basic education expansion, and the golden age of business agenda, the Kufuor administration sought to widen opportunity while strengthening private sector participation. The emphasis was not on state dominance, but on creating conditions under which individuals, entrepreneurs, farmers, and small businesses could thrive. In this respect, the Kufuor era laid the institutional and social foundation of a property-owning democracy by linking social protection with productivity and growth. I further submit that the Akufo-Addo administration advanced the tradition further by deepening human capital development and industrial transformation in an era marked by extraordinary global disruptions, including the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain shocks, and geopolitical instability. Through policies such as the free SHS, free TVET, 1D, 1F, Planting for Food and Jobs, the government combines social access, production expansion, and democratic accountability. These interventions reflect an adaptive center-right approach, investing in education and health to empower citizens, promoting industrialization and agriculture to expand ownership and enterprise, and strengthening institutional transparency. Rather than departing from the tradition, the administration recalibrated it to meet the demands of a modern developing economy facing global volatility. Taken together, the policies pursued under both administrations reveal a coherent center-right logic in which the state functions as an enabler rather than a substitute for individual enterprise and market activity. Social investment in health, education, agriculture, industrialization, and governance were strategically developed to expand human capability, correct market failures, and integrate broader segments of society into productive economic life. Far from embracing redistributive populism, these interventions sought to empower individuals to participate meaningfully in development, thereby reinforcing the tradition's enduring commitment to liberty, enterprise, constitutionalism, and property-owning democracy. The Akufo-Addo administrations demonstrate that the Dankwa Dombo Buzia tradition is not static. It is a living political philosophy, capable of adaptation without ideological surrender, and responsive to the structural realities of development, while remaining anchored in its core commitment to liberty, enterprise, and constitutional governance. Our respected senior faculty members, student leaders, and students, in conclusion of this submission, I shall submit with emphasis that tracing its historical roots from UGCC through successive political formations to the emergence of the new patriotic party, the Dankwa Buzia Dombo political tradition is anchored in constitutionalism, individual liberty, decentralization, and a private sector-led development. The social intervention implemented, as aforestated, have demonstrated a clear continuity in the center-right ideological orientation, despite differences in context and policy emphasis. These policies represent a pragmatic adaptation of the traditions, realities of a modern developing economy by expanding access to opportunity, strengthening human capability, and fostering participation in productive economic life. These interventions have sought to translate liberal democratic ideals into tangible socio-economic outcomes. Overall, the Dankwa Buzia Dombo tradition emerges not as a static or elitist ideology detached from social reality, but as a dynamic political philosophy capable of reconciling economic freedom with social responsibility. Its continual relevance lies in its ability to adapt to changing developmental challenges while remaining anchored in its core commitment to liberty, enterprise, and democratic governance, principles that remain central to Ghana's pursuit of sustainable development and political stability. The past 1 year, we have seen a government that believes in rhetorics, that talks more than it works. It promised the people of Ghana 1 job, 3 shifts, and called it 24-hour economy. It promised women banking. It promised to increase the producer price of cocoa to 6,000. Today, unemployment is on the rise. Today, this government has failed to implement its own flagship initiative, the initiative of 1 job, 3 shifts. Today, it has rather created a bureaucracy for its so-called 24-hour economy. To our mind in the minority, this 24-hour economy is more than a slogan. It's more of a slogan than a policy. The women banking has also not seen the light of day. Whilst the government talks about inflation levels having come down, the ordinary Ghanaian is going through crisis. Electricity has shot up by almost 30%. They came to repeal the e-levy, but ended up coming out with a law that charges 1 cedi per liter of petrol. They introduced the Doomsor levy. And above all, today, the suffering cocoa farmer is at the receiving end. It is time for our government to move away from slogans. It is time for our government to move away from the political rhetorics and focus on the core duties of governance, development, job creation, and the rule of law. Thank you very much.
Growing up, we were told we are the future leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is now. Young Commons Forum will organize dialogues, policy conversations, mentorship sessions, and leadership engagement. We will create opportunities for students to interact with policymakers, academics, and professionals. To the students leaders here today, the SRC Parliament, the whole executive associations, your presence here shows that UCC is ready to think deeply, ready to engage constructively, ready to lead responsibly. To our lecturers and distinguished guests, your guidance and wisdom is essential.
On behalf of the YCF of the University of Education, Winnipeg, I bring you warm greetings and unwavering solidarity. We are here not merely as guests. We are here as partners with one ideology. When you organize, we organize. When you speak, we amplify. Osahin, your story reminds us that leadership is not accidental. It is cultivated, it is mentored, it is shaping in spaces like here where we find ourselves. Following our inauguration at UW last year, we have consolidated over 300 of our members onto a unified communication platform to strengthen coordination and deepen engagement. Our primary focus for this academic year is to convey student leadership, campus influencers, and aspiring leaders for a comprehensive leadership seminar. Honorable, today, on behalf of the many Ghanaian youths who look up to visionary mentorship and principled leadership, we express our sincere appreciation for the energy and resource you invest in grooming the next generation of leadership. And we say your investment in youth leadership will not be in vain. Respectfully, I repeat, your investment in youth leadership will not be in vain.